Hello everyone, good morning, good afternoon, and good evening. Welcome back to our second video, reading our new book, Power of the Magdalene, written by Stuart Wilson and Joanna Prentis. So we start part 2 today, where we learn about the angelic being that helped them through this process in writing this book, or basically putting all the information together so that they could bring this to us in a book. And that is the angelic being by the name of Alariel. So we start out here with a little quote that we're going to find in chapter 28, but it is from Alariel. You are constantly being challenged to expand your awareness and reach out into new frequencies of consciousness, new perspectives of truth, new possibilities of being. So chapter 3, first meeting with Alariel. We have been writing these books very much on the basis of our inner guidance and have learned to trust that guidance over the years. And there was one instance when our guidance helped us to open a door to greater knowledge that would otherwise have been closed to us. It came about like this. Stuart had been exploring a life when he had been an architect called Anquel, so Anquel, who lived on Atlantis sometime before the Golden Age. Atlantis was the legendary ancient continent which was reputed to cover much of what is now the Atlantic Ocean. This life had provided a good deal of interesting information, but we were surprised and excited when our guidance told us that Anquel also had access to a much more profound and significant source. And we were told that our best chance of accessing this source would be to ask Anquel a question which we knew he would be unable to answer. So we started casting about for a suitable question to ask. We already knew that Anquel had an interest in slow meditational form of movement, and this sounded to us something like an Atlantean form of Tai Chi. Taking this as our starting point, we then constructed a question along the lines that our guidance had suggested and put this to Anquel. And I'm not sure if I'm saying that right. Anquel. So Joanna starts out with bringing this forth to the being of Anquel. We are interested in the slow meditational form of movement which you mentioned. There is a group of people called the Essenes who live many thousands of years in the future from your time. We understand that the Essenes have a form of meditational movement and wonder if you could research this for us. And Anquel answers, I have never heard of these people, and if they exist in the future, I would have no way of researching this information by conventional means. However, I do have an angelic source who might be able to help. I will ask him to speak to you directly. There followed a long pause, and I had the sense of a different energy begin to focus through Stuart. Then the communication began again. This is Alariel speaking for a group of 12 angels who work with the order of Melchizedek. We understand you have a question concerning the Essenes, a brotherhood which is known to us. Comment by Stuart. We were aware of Melchizedek because of our work on our first book. The Order of Melchizedek is a service order of advanced teachers working on many planetary systems. We devoted part 15 of the Essenes, Children of the Light, to a discussion of the order. The session continues. So then Joanna says, Thank you, Alariel. Yes, we would like to know if the Essenes practiced a kind of slow meditation form of movement. Alariel. He says yes, but only in the northern group of communities. There were 7 sequences of movement, each having a symbolic significance, and 7 is the symbol or number of God. First, earth, represented by the lion, water, represented by the fish, fire, represented by the dragon, air, represented by the dove, body, represented by the bear, mind, represented by the wolf, spirit, represented by the eagle. The movement of all these creatures was imitated in the sequences, and the whole form gave the sense of gathering all of creation into one unified flow of energy. This form came out of the work of a group of Essenes who lived at Mount Carmel. The accommodation there was more confined than that experienced at the larger communities, which covered a greater area of land. And there was a need to develop a system which would exercise the body in a small space. So it was that special need that gave rise to this form, and it did spread to some other communities in the northern group, but it was not widely practiced. Joanna, thank you, Alariel. That is most interesting. You say that you speak for a group of angels. Is there anything else about yourself that you would like to tell us? Your position in the angelic world, for example? Alariel, we work as a group and do not focus on the personal level. In the angelic world, it is the work that is important, not the individual angel. Joanna, could you please tell us some more about your group then? Alariel, the members of our group have worked with the Melchizedek order on a number of planetary systems over a long period of time. It is our joy and privilege to work with the Melchizedek because they are so focused on the light. Since we became specialized in our work, it was considered appropriate that we should dialogue with groups such as your own, who have an interest in the work of the order. Joanna, are there any limits to these dialogues that you can foresee? Alariel, these communications will be limited more by your ability to conceive and phrase questions than by our ability to answer them. We respond to what is asked, and if you don't ask specific questions, you are likely to get only general answers. The more specific the questions are, the more they will bring forth information on the things you are interested in. As these dialogues continue, you may find the quality of the questions increases, and so more interesting answers will emerge. The universe is vast, and there are some areas of knowledge that go beyond our experience, but much remains for you to explore. Joanna, well, thank you for this chance to dialogue with you. We shall try to come up with some good questions. I gather from what you have already told us that you have an interest in the Essenes. Alariel, of course, we are interested in all Melchizedek operations, and the Essenes were particularly significant because they lived at an important time for your planet. The cycle downwards into material density had to be brought to a close, and the upward spiral into light had to begin. The Essenes played a major part in this whole process. They were the main focus of Melchizedek activity on your planet at that time. Joanna, so the Essenes were really quite advanced in many ways? Alariel, yes, but that is not surprising when you consider that they had directly and indirectly the guidance of Melchizedek teachers. The consciousness and the technology of the Essenes were both quite advanced for their time. They even had an early form of electricity, something that your culture regards as a very recent invention. Yet 2,000 years ago, the Essenes lit their dwellings with electric lamps, and this is mentioned in that book. One of the people that lived in an Essene community described something that lit up and how they made it do it, and it was electricity. Comment by Stuart. A diagram and description of this Bad Dad battery and details of a modern test on the effectiveness of this design are given in Lost Secrets of the Sacred Art by Lawrence Gardner. Our next question focused on Joseph of Arimathea, one of the central characters described in our first book, The Essenes, Children of the Light. Joseph was one of the most powerful Jews of his generation, and he controlled most of the mining of tin. I think he's also Jesus's uncle. Joanna, we understand that Joseph of Arimathea played a big part in the work of the Essenes. Alariel, yes, he was in many ways the linchpin that kept the whole operation together. Joseph and the organization he led provided a vital transport, communication, and support system, without which the Essenes would not have been so effective. And his cool head and resolute leadership at times of crisis kept the Essenes together and focused them on the task at hand. Joanna, an Essene called Daniel ben Ezra, who is described in our book, was a close friend of Joseph. Daniel told us that Joseph's father was called Joseph too, but traditional accounts give his name as Joachim. Could you comment on this, please? Alariel, when Jews of this period assumed positions of responsibility within their social group, they took a patronymic name, one example being Joseph. So a man could rise in that society to become a Joseph in the same way that a woman could take a matronymic name and become a Mary or matronymic. It is possible that Daniel had this custom in mind when referring to Joseph's father. Comment by Stuart. There is confirmation of this practice in Chapter 5 of Bloodline of the Holy Grail by Lawrence Gardner. Kathy Welchman gave us some interesting questions about Daniel and Joseph, and Joanna asked these on her behalf during a later session with Alariel. So Joanna asks, what did Daniel ben Ezra look like? Alariel, fairly tall, quite thin and wiry, suntanned, and with a beard. Joanna, did he look like Joseph of Arimathea? Alariel, Joseph was more thick-set, more stocky, a heavier boned and more substantial frame, which served him well during all the long journeys he took, with all the stresses and strains involved in traveling. Joanna, were Daniel and Joseph the same age? Alariel, Joseph was 1 year older than Daniel. We realized from the beginning that this contact with Alariel could be a unique opportunity for us. Here in Alariel, we had found an angelic being who did not seem to be limited by time or space. Better still, he worked within a group of 12 angels, and that might extend his knowledge. This was clearly a most useful resource, and it might enable us to probe areas that so far had proved elusive. Where there were gaps in the past life record, we could use Alariel's knowledge to fill these in and obtain a more complete picture. So now we're going to move on to Chapter 4, an angelic perspective. And so far, these chapters are not super long. So here we are. This is Chapter 4, just a few pages. But we will stop when we're done with Chapter 4. Realizing that we had the opportunity to access a wide range of information through our contact with Alariel, we set about developing a series of questions, which we hoped would prove interesting. As our attention had focused on the Essenes in our first book, we begin the next session with a question about the Essene Brotherhood. Joanna, the Essenes who are in incarnation now, what is their main task? So those that have come back and they're living on earth. Alariel, partly they are here to support a reassessment of how things were 2,000 years ago, particularly in the group around Yeshua or Jeshua. They are here to encourage all people of goodwill within the Judeo-Christian tradition to take a look at the whole narrative of Jeshua's life in a much broader way. In doing so, they may be able to build a bridgehead between the people actively working in Christian churches and the more progressive and liberated people for whom new ideas and new perspectives seem quite natural. So perhaps for you and me. Joanna, many Christians may find new ideas and new perspectives very challenging. Alariel, yes, but change has always been present in the Christian experience. And there are aspects of Christianity that bring the promise of renewal and a fresh beginning. In particular, there are a number of groups that are now focusing on the testimony of the female disciples and the central importance of Mary Magdalene. Mary's story has enormous potential to move people out of their old rigid ideas and into new understanding of the role played by women at that time. This not only provides a refreshing new perspective, but it also starts to build an alternative history to put alongside the traditional accounts. In time, this may even lead to a reassessment of Jeshua and his teachings, which I think is sorely needed. Joanna, what do you see as the outcome of the teachings of Jeshua? Where was all this leading to, and what was he trying to do? Very interesting. Alariel, what he was trying to do was to establish a new spiritual path, a new way of living and relating to people and to God. Using the cosmic energy of love, which he was anchoring into earth reality, he was encouraging people to focus that energy through the heart center. This energy is profoundly transformative. It moves through the dry forest of the heart like a cleansing fire, sweeping away the dead wood of past experiences and all the anger, fear, and hurt that people cling to. When all that is gone, it empowers the individual in expanding awareness and rising into higher frequencies of consciousness. All this reestablishes the children of the light in a new relationship with God. Comment by Stuart. Light in the spiritual sense with a capital L is the eternal divine light, also called the Ein Sof, A-I-N, and then the next word S-O-P-H, like the name Sophia, which is wisdom. Ein Sof. This is quite distinct from the common light of star systems with a small l. The session continues. Joanna, how do you perceive God? Alariel, it is easier to begin by saying how we do not perceive God. We do not see God as being in any way gender limited, space limited, or time limited. Any being who was limited in any of these ways could not be the true and ultimate God. Angels perceive God as a vast web of consciousness and energy that permeates the universe and is, capital I-S, the universe. But that is only God manifest. God also exists beyond manifestation, where there is no physical universe. And this level is beyond our understanding. We might borrow a term from your Native American teachers and say that this is great mystery. We love and revere great mystery, yet don't expect ever to understand this level of God. The levels of God that are accessible to our understanding focus on oneness, joy, and love. And so we take these as indicators of the true nature of Father, Mother, God. Comment by Stuart. In Native American tradition, great mystery is the ultimate source of creation. Great mystery creates the Great Spirit, which in turn manifests and nourishes the whole of creation. You see how we all call God something different, and yet we argue over the meaning of it and who's right, and it doesn't really matter because we're all honoring, loving, and worshiping the one true creator. Jesus does not want to be worshiped. He never wanted to be worshiped. God is where it's at. You can find God through Jesus. Okay, that's a whole other subject, but your ultimate goal is that connection and relationship with God and an understanding to the best of your ability of who God is, where God is, and what his true purpose is through us. The session continues. Joanna, it has been difficult for many people to reconcile the idea of a powerful God with the existence of so much suffering in the world. Why would God allow so much suffering to exist? Alariel, God, working through the agency of the angelic host, constructs the universe you see around you, but has given human beings free will upon the earth. So God is like an architect designing a theater in which you sit. Now, if you do not enjoy the play you are watching, is it logical to blame the architect of the theater? Of course not. You have free will, which is essentially the right to be wrong. You have exercised this right for a long while and have inflicted suffering upon others and upon yourselves. But if you were offered the choice of ceasing to exercise free will, we do not think you would choose that. So it comes down to this. God built the theater, but you're responsible for the play. Ooh, I love that. Joanna, another way of putting it would be to say that freedom of action and an all-powerful God are incompatible. Alariel, God is indeed all-powerful in the creation of the universe, but you can choose how you experience this universe. You have free will to explore all the possibilities of life in your own way, but some choices may involve suffering. Okay. This is very much in line with what we've read so far in the Christ letters and also in Mary's message to the world. It really is interesting to see the paradigms in where the similarities lie and where they don't lie together. Of course, it would be possible to create a world where no one suffered because everyone was like a puppet with God, or the angelic agents of God, pulling all the strings. Would you be happy living in such a world? And would it have created the rich tapestry of spiritual development and creative genius that humanity has demonstrated? We think not. It would be a very safe and boring world with few possibilities for spiritual growth. And it was always God's intention that you should develop to fulfill your greatest spiritual potential, evolving over long periods of time to take your place eventually amongst the Elohim. Joanna, please tell us something about the Elohim. Alariel, the Elohim appear in many traditions, sometimes under the name of great angels or great spirit beings. They can be regarded as the architects of the universe, planning and supervising creation and working to bring it back into the greater harmony. As the universe is linked together in one vast web of consciousness and being, the whole system must move as one. Your galaxy is now beginning to return to source by ascending into the light. And to keep pace with this, a good deal of help is being given to planet Earth at this time, under the direction of the Elohim. Joanna, what do you see as the greatest contrast between human and angelic worlds? Alariel, our world is ordered but predictable. I think ordered and predictable kind of go together. Ordered and predictable. The human world may seem chaotic, but it is vibrant, full of conscious creative will. And the results of that creativity constantly surprise us. You are always producing new solutions to problems. And your ingenuity and ability to come up with creative solutions is something we marvel at. Only the highest ranks of the angelic world are required to show this level of creativity. For the great bulk of angels within the host, it is more important that we follow the plan already given, with a caring and loving attitude, working for the good of all concerned. Joanna, do angels experience emotion? Alariel, we respond to some frequencies which you might regard as emotional, such as compassion, and sadness when beings turn towards darkness, and joy when they turn back to the light. But the more basic emotions, such as fear, anger, hatred, and envy, we do not resonate to. If you feel constantly nourished, loved, and sustained by the source of all, and live and move within the oneness of that source, these basic emotions simply have no meaning. Joanna, how do you experience time? Time does exist in the angelic world, but not time as you know it. Our time consists of one thing following another, a series of sequences, if you like, which is why we call it sequential time. Your time also has sequential elements in it, but it is rigid, or at least as rigid as far as most humans are concerned. Our sequential time is not rigid. It is very flexible indeed. We can return to any part of it and rerun any segment of it. But within that segment, the sequences will follow one another in a logical order. They will not be scrambled in a random fashion. We would not be able to implement the plans given by the Elohim if time was random and haphazard, so that no sequence followed any other sequence in a logical order. It is just that the ordering of the sequences is one thing, and the accessing of them is another. We respect the ordering, but can access any sequence at will. Explaining time. I've always found that a bit confusing in other ways. Okay. We see consciousness as one and evolving towards the one again, and that is one with the capital O. But in between these points of oneness going through apparent separation, manyness and linear time as you know it. The rigid linear part of time we see as the middle stage of spiritual evolution, the one that you are passing through now. When you move on to your next stage of development, you will see time as much more flexible and events within any sequence as much more accessible than you do at present. Certain human beings with special skills, like a trained shaman, for example, may be able to perceive time in this more flexible way. But these skills are comparatively rare amongst humans at this stage of your development. Joanna, do angels pray? Alariel, it depends upon what you mean by prayer. Praying in the sense of asking Father, Mother, God for something, very rarely. Praying in the sense of attunement to God, God's will, design, purpose, yes, all the time. Our work would not be possible without constant attunement. Sadly, human beings do not understand attunement. They think of it as simply aligning with the divine will, but it's more complex than that. There is a divine plan, a blueprint for the whole of creation, and the angelic host works to manifest that blueprint. First in creation, and then in sustaining what is created, and then in assisting in the spiritual evolution of manifested beings. This blueprint is a combination of firm principles and flexible application of those principles. So it is not a totally fixed and rigid system. At any time, in the light of unfolding events, an angel may attune and ask that the plan be changed and modified. In planetary systems where there are varying degrees of free will, this is essential, for free will often changes the patterns of things quite substantially. When an angel puts forward a possible change to the existing plan, this is considered within the angelic host and either A, immediately accepted and implemented, B, put forward for investigation by a panel of angel experts in this area, or C, assigned to a conference of angels with a wide range of abilities and experience. This is essential when a very major change is proposed. Joanna, how can we best encourage change on this planet? Do you think we should fight or oppose old organizations which are resisting change? Alariel, be aware that whenever you fight something, you are focusing on it and giving it energy. That is so true. If you wish to remove something from manifestation, it is better to focus on its opposite. Give that good quality or organization energy and watch it flourish and grow, knowing that the old will wither away in its own time. I could think of so many examples of ways that we could do that for our loved ones, for ourselves, if we're suffering from a serious illness. A lot of people like to say they're fighting cancer, and that's really the opposite of what you want to do for exactly the reason that I just read. Although I say that knowing that's a very, very difficult, I've never dealt with anything like that for myself or a close loved one. So easy to say if it's not you in that situation, but it doesn't mean that you can't shift your perspective and focus in a different way and looking at it in a different light. Joanna, the concept of soul aspects is still a difficult one for many people. Could you give your perception of this, please? Alariel, during the early stages of human evolution, it was sufficient for the soul to put down one part of itself, one incarnated presence upon the earth at a time. Then, as the civilizations on the earth developed and became more complex, offering a wider range of spiritual experience, many souls wished to access several of these possibilities at the same time. Mary talks about this in Mary's message to the world, how many of us are living more than one life through our different soul aspects. I certainly do believe that's true. Often as many as 12 at one time. The memories of all 12 personalities feed back into the soul, and in subsequent lives, all later aspects of that soul would remember these lives. I remember reading somewhere about bipolar disorder or multiple personality disorder, and they were looking at it from a spiritual aspect, saying that they were wondering if it was multiple lives sort of coming through at once into the same, into the same person, that somehow that happens. It kind of makes sense to me. Anything is possible, really. Okay. Joanna, what element of human consciousness that we have lost is it important for us to bring back now? Alariel, undoubtedly, it is the goddess element. The sacred feminine is the source of the highest and most subtle wisdom and the most profound knowing with a capital K. Shamanic cultures have always recognized the primacy of feminine wisdom. And it is time that this primary, symbolized by Mary Magdalene, is more widely acknowledged in the world. It is only by acknowledging the primacy of feminine wisdom that conflicts will be resolved and the deep wounds that humanity has inflicted upon itself over the centuries will finally begin to heal. Joanna, what do you think is the greatest human failing? Alariel, to go into instant judgment about many people and many things. This is particularly marked when you are thinking about the outcome of any of your actions. In many human situations, you are in a position that we would describe as IDAO. Insufficient data to assess the outcome. Yet you continually try to judge what the result of your actions might be, and worse still, punish yourselves when the outcome is not as you have predicted. There are so many variables on a planet where free will dominates that frankly, it is foolish to predict a single outcome in any situation. Predict a whole range of possible outcomes if you must. But even then, something may happen that you had not foreseen and therefore could not predict. As timelines moving into the future are so subtle and so subject to change, it would be much wiser course for you to predict nothing, but simply observe what happens as time moves on. And then maybe give your permission to yourself not to worry, since you're not going to predict anything. You're just going to go along with it. That's actually what one of my viewers said yesterday. I posted a video about using AI to make spiritual content, and he made this comment that was very true. Sit back and watch what happens and just observe what's going to take place. Because at the end of the day, there's only so much you can do as one single person. And that doesn't mean that your single self can't make a change, but you only have so much control. We cannot control the outer aspects of our life. We can't control the universe in that sense. We can only control ourselves. And sitting back and watching is far better than worrying and wondering and assuming and predicting. It sets you up for so much disappointment, for so many more frustrations, and it's just not a healthy way to live. I'm not saying don't be prepared or care about anything, but in the bigger scope of things that are truly out of your hands, there's really no other choice you can make. And even though we inherently know that, we are so wired to worry and to future trip, as I like to call it. And what do you think is the strength? Did I finish reading that? Yes. And Joanna asks, and what do you think is the greatest strength of human beings? And Alariel says, their ability to respond with love in their hearts to others. Human beings, animals, or plants, when these are in difficulty or pain. It is the unique human heart quality that will carry you through, for it has the ability to sweep away all the dross of selfishness and greed. When human beings feel and act with their hearts, they are capable of making remarkable breakthroughs. Okay, so we're going to stop right there. And in part 3, we're going to be reading about the Essene drama unfolds. And let me just take a peek at what that chapter looks like to see. Part 3. They're broken up into parts, but then they're also broken up into chapters. So part 3, chapter 5. The subject is the Essenes, it looks like. Chapter 5, which is the very next page, James in Israel and Egypt. And then we have James in Gaul and Britain. And we may be able to read these two together, although, yeah, I'll take a look and see how many pages, and hopefully we can read the part 3, these two sections together. So thank you all so very much for joining me. I love you all so much. And until I see you again, take care of you, take care of those around you. And yeah, I'll see you again soon for part 3 of our book, Power of the Magdalene. Bye-bye.